Classic Treasury. Magical Stories. The Buried Moon. From Tales of Wonder Every Child Should Know, by Kate Douglas Wiggin and Nora Archibald Smith. Long ago, the Carland was all in bogs, great pools of black water and creeping trickles of green water, and the squishy moles that squirted when you stepped on them. The moon up yonder shone just as she does now, and when she shone, she lighted up the bog pools so that one could walk about almost as safe as in the day. But when she didn't shine, out came the things that dwell in the darkness and went about seeking to do evil and harm. Boggles and the crawling horrors all came out when the moon didn't shine. Well, the moon heard of this, and being kind and good, as she surely is, shining for us in the night instead of taking her natural rest, she was troubled. "I will see for myself, I will," said she. "Maybe it's not so bad as folks make out." Sure enough, at the month's end, down she stepped, wrapped up in a black cloak and a black hood cover. Her yellow shining hair straight, she went to the bog edge and looked about her. Water here and water there, waving tussocks and trembling moles, and great black snags all twisted and bent. Before her was all the dark, but for the glimmer of the stars in the pools, and the light that came from her own white feet stealing out of her black cloak. The moon drew her cloak faster about her and trembled, but she didn't go back without seeing all there was to be seen. So on she went, stepping as light as the wind in summer from tuft to tuft between the muddy, gurgling water holes. Just as she came near a big black pool, her foot slipped and she was so close to tumbling in. She grabbed with both hands a snag nearby to steady herself with, but as she touched it, it twined itself around her wrists like a pair of handcuffs and gripped her so that she couldn't move. She pulled and twisted and fought, but it was no good. She was stuck and must stay stuck. Presently, as she stood trembling in the dark, wondering if help would come, she heard something calling in the distance. Calling, calling, and then dying away with a sob, till the marshes were full of a pitiful crying sound. Then she heard steps floundering along, squishing in the mud and slipping on the tufts, and in the darkness she saw a white face with great feared eyes. It was a man, strayed in the bogs. Dazed with fears, he struggled on towards the flickering light that looked like help and safety. But when the poor moon saw that he was coming nearer and nearer to the deep hole, farther and farther from the path, she was so mad and sorry that she struggled and fought and pulled harder than ever. And though she couldn't get loose, she twisted and turned till her black hood fell back off her shining yellow hair, and the beautiful light that came from it drove away the darkness. "Oh," But the man cried with joy to see the light again, and at once all the evil things flew back into the dark corners, for they cannot abide the light. So he could see where he was, and where the path was, and how he could get out of the marsh. And he was in such great haste to get away from the quicks and boggles and things that dwelled there, that he scarce looked at the brave light that came from the beautiful shining yellow hair streaming out over the black cloak and falling to the water at his feet. And the moon herself was so taken up with saving him and with rejoicing that he was back on the right path, that she clean forgot that she needed help herself, and that she was held fast by the black snag. So off he went, spent and gasping and stumbling and sobbing with joy, flying for his life out of the terrible bogs, that it came over the moon that she would like to go with him. So she pulled and fought as she were mad, till she fell on her knees, spent with tugging at the foot of the snag. And as she lay there, gasping for breath, the black hood fell forward over her head. So out went the blessed light, and back came the darkness, with all its evil things, with a screech and a howl. They came crowding round her, mocking and snatching and beating and shrieking with rage and spite and swearing and snarling, for they knew her to be their old enemy that drove them back into the corners and kept them from working their wicked wills. They caught hold of her with horrid, bony fingers and laid her in the deep water at the foot of the snag, and the bogles fetched a strange big stone and rolled it on top of her to keep her from rising. And they told 2 of the will-o'-wykes to take turns in watching on the black snag, to see that she lay safe and still and couldn't get out to soil the spot. And there lay the poor moon, dead and buried in the bog, till someone would set her loose, and who'd know where to look for her? Well, the days passed, and it was time for the new moon's coming, and the folk looked about, for the moon was a good friend to the marsh folk, and they were main glad when the dark time was gone, and the paths were safe again, and the evil things were driven back by the blessed light into the darkness and the water holes. But days and days passed, and the new moon never came, and the nights were dark, and the evil things were worse than ever. And still the days went on, and the new moon never came. The poor folk were strangely feared and amazed. One day, as they sat in the inn, a man from the far end of the boglands was smoking and listening to the talk about the moon, when all at once he sat up and slapped his knees. "I'd clean forgot, but I reckon I know where the moon be," he said, and he told them of how he was lost in the bogs, and how, when he nearly dead with fright, the light shone out, and he found the path and got home safe. So come the next night in the darklings, out they went all together, feeling, as you can believe, fearful and scared. And they stumbled and started along the paths into the mists of the bog. They saw nothing, though they heard sighings and flutterings in their ears, and felt cold, wet fingers touching them. But altogether, looking round, while they came near to the pool beside the great snag where the moon lay buried. And all at once they stopped, quaking and dazed and scared, for there was the great stone, half in, half out of the water, for all the world like a big strange coffin, and at the head was the black snag, stretching out its two arms in a dark, gruesome cross, and on it a tiny light flickered like a dying candle. And they all knelt down in the mud and said, "Our Lord." Then they went nearer and took hold of the big stone and shoved it up, and afterwards they said that for 1 minute they saw a strange and beautiful face looking up at them out of the black water. But the light came so quickly and so white and shining that they stepped back, dazed by it, and the very next minute, when they could see again, there was a full moon in the sky, bright and beautiful and kind as ever, shining and smiling down at them, and making the bogs and the paths as clear as day, and stealing into the very corners, as though she had driven the darkness and the boggles clean away if she could. The end.